Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude, welcome back, and today we're going to be talking about another tropical disturbance that is forming and just got recognized by the National Hurricane Center, and we're going to talk about its chances for developing today. Before I start, however, be sure to drop a like on the video and subscribe with those notifications turned on so you do not miss the next video, and we're just going to get straight into it here. So, before we start looking at the National Hurricane Center and its chances, I wanted to say that this is the time of year where we start to see storms developing, alright, a little bit more. So here we are, this is like a map saying like how often tropical storms and hurricanes develop. We are like end of June as this video is being released, and you can see we're pretty much like right around this zone, so we're starting to go up from where we were in May, and usually the peak is between second half of August and second half of October. Is usually when, so basically from August 20th to October 20th is when we usually see the highest amount of storms develop usually, and September 10th is was when we see the peak. But we're already like on the rise, all right, for the season. And by July and August, things will start ramping up. Climatologically, not always, but climatologically, that's how these storms would normally develop in a normal year. So here is June. You can see storms typically do form in the Caribbean in June, and then they track maybe to the Western Gulf or the Eastern Gulf up the East Coast. Now, that doesn't always have to happen. That's just what is typically done in June. Now, we're between these two maps, June and July, because we're at the end of June. So, for July, we do see storms. And this is, spoiler alert, this is where our tropical disturbance is, where I just circled. It's going to be heading towards the Windward Islands. All right, and that's usually where they do develop for July, maybe going up the East Coast, which actually, that kind of looks like the track right now. Maybe not the East Coast part of it, but the track, some models do have it tracking to about maybe in this zone over here. All right, but then that's it. Alright, so we're going to be taking a look at the model, so don't worry about that. The Caribbean, the storms can track through the Caribbean as well, maybe up the Western or Eastern Gulf. That's typically what happens in July. Alright, so now here we are, 30% chance of development in the next 5 days, but also in the next 2 days. And that's because, the reason those two numbers are the same is because by Thursday, things will become less conducive. So we only got 2 days for this to develop anyway. So this is 500 miles east of the Windward Islands, still as of 8 o'clock this morning. Alright. And it's moving 15 to 20 miles an hour. So if it's moving 15 miles an hour, it's probably moved, because it's 10 o'clock when I'm recording this, so probably moved another 30 miles. So I'd say it's about 470 miles away from the Windward Islands. Some additional development is possible before upper level winds, aka wind shear, become less conducive for further organization by Thursday. But just because it won't develop, like if, let's say it doesn't develop in the next 2 days or by Thursday, it continues tracking through the Caribbean, but things might get interesting after that, whether it's the Gulf or the East Coast. All right, so it could weaken and then like re-strengthen. We have seen that happen so many times before, and the guidance, or some of the guidance, is thinking that could possibly happen. All right, here is the satellite imagery of the storm right now. You can almost see like the outflow, how the storms are kind of like spreading out. Like look at the cloud action going this way. We see clouds spreading south, so the storm is expanding. Right, it's strengthening and it's expanding. There is a lot of warm ocean temperatures, and we're going to be talking about that coming up as well. But you can see the shear, those higher cloud tops. You can already see the shear coming in from the west. All right, and that's what's going to be causing trouble for development by the time Thursday rolls around. But with that said, here is the sea surface temperature anomalies. Now the coordinates as of 8 o'clock this morning were 52 west and 11 north. So the storm is sitting right about in this region. So you can see outside of that, like the sea surface temperatures between 1 and 2 degrees Celsius above average. So we're sitting in a pretty good developing environment in terms of sea surface temperatures. And you can see pretty much its whole entire rest of its journey, the sea surface temperatures will probably be above average. Now, because of Claudette, sea surface temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico are trended a little bit below average, although the Western Gulf has still stayed pretty warm because Claudette really never tracked in that direction. All right, but sea surface temperatures in the Eastern Gulf are going to be temporarily cooler, and then they'll warm right back up pretty soon. But for the Caribbean, it's pretty warm, especially out where it is right now. We see sea surface temperatures that are more above average than they are out here. All right, so Lesser Antilles and Windward Islands, you guys might want to watch out because the storm is tracking in your direction. And regardless of development, we could see still heavy rain and maybe some gusty winds. Sea surface temperatures, I'll have a map coming up very soon that'll explain this better because I know it's hard to tell the difference between the colors. But we do see sea surface temperatures that are definitely above 80 degrees, above 27 degrees Celsius in the Eastern Caribbean and just past the Windward Islands and Lesser Antilles, and that's where we're seeing the storm sitting right now. So it's having a pretty good time developing when we talk about the sea surface temperatures. And again, the storm is pretty far south. I mean, it's sitting right here, it's going to be tracking in sort of a direction like this. If it were to keep going due west, it would probably go right into South America. All right, but because it's moving in that west-northwest direction, it'll probably be hitting the Lesser Antilles or the Windward Islands. And here is that map that better tells our sea surface temperatures for the European model, right? So here you see right around the islands 82, 81. So sea surface temperatures are definitely plenty warm enough. But look in the Caribbean, 84, 85, 86. Like around the Bahamas, it's really warm here. Then, of course, in the Gulf, we're still in the 80s, even though the Eastern Gulf cooled down a couple degrees again because of Claudette. But the Western Gulf, also still in the 80s. But talking about for where the storm is right now, 82, 81 is still definitely conducive enough for tropical development. But we have to talk about the other factors as well, which will be coming up. So here's the probability in the next 5 days. Our NCP, FNMOC, our GEM, our European model. You know those 4 models that are usually on this map here. And as you can see, development chances between 30 and 40% according to these 4 models combined. And we're actually looking at the ensemble tracks right here. So as you can see, now this is just the NCP ensembles, right? It kind of leaves out the other 3 models. But the NCP ensembles do give this about a 50% chance of development. All right, and they kind of have it tracking sort of in this direction. So again, pretty much towards the Caribbean islands, but also another tropical wave. We're not going to be talking about this one because it's really like it still has to come off of Africa, but potentially something forming behind that as well, which could get even more interesting than the one we're talking about right now. But that will be in a future video. So GFS model. So here's a storm right now. You can see on the right side of your screen, it's pretty much right about here. Again, the energy is there. It's just strung out. Now look what happens. Over about 24 to 48 hours, it becomes more circular, which is good, although the energy starts to go down a bit. But with that said, there's a storm. Now by early Friday, I mean, notice it might actually slow down because this is like overnight Thursday and it's just now hitting the Lesser Antilles. So you can see this is moving. I wouldn't say it's actually moving that fast. I mean, it is still 500 miles away though. All right, but there you go. Now, what could actually happen here and why it might be taking a little bit longer, this could actually break up into 2 branches. So here's batch number 1, here's batch number 2. Because if you look at the southern tail of that, notice how the southern tail kind of broke off and already went through the islands, and this one's still moving in this direction. So it could break off into 2 pieces. But if it does stay in one piece, it would probably take until Thursday before it hits the islands. All right? Because if you look at the 5-day or 2 to 5 day development, or the 5-day development zone, excuse me, it's still not at the islands yet. All right? All right, so with that said, let's move on, or let's keep moving on and then see what happens to this. So a lot of the earlier GFS model run tracks, like I would say from yesterday, I'd say about like 6 to 8 model runs in a row had some sort of big hurricane, like whether it was one hitting Texas, one had it going into Florida and going up the East Coast. Now, the most recent model run, we'll see what happens in the afternoon model runs. All right, but for this one, they kind of have the storm just going north of the Caribbean. There it is. After that, maybe developing into something. The energy still looks pretty weak, but there it is, just drifting up towards the Delmarva. So we'll see what can develop with the system. Then maybe it'll get picked up by a front or a jet stream by then and just get carried out to sea. So that's the GFS model. Canadian model, we'll see if it says anything different here. So here's a Canadian model. Again, there's a storm. Again, it's a little small area of energy, but there it is. And again, the small systems can develop quickly, but can also diminish quickly if the conditions aren't right. All right, so that's why the small system can be a little dangerous. Canadian model, so here's a storm. Now at this point, it's moving over and something in the Pacific too. That looks interesting. I saw that earlier. But something maybe moving over Haiti, Hispaniola, Dominican Republic. All right, then heading towards the Bahamas, and then there's a storm after that. If you can't keep track of it, there it is. All right, now we're going out towards the end of the month at this point, so it's a little bit long track. But same thing as a GFS model. Some moisture could get fed up into the mid-Atlantic, and maybe we might see some heavier downpours on the first day of July, possibly. So Canadian and GFS are pretty similar in terms of where it could track and its strength as well. Now the European model really has nothing happening to the system, right? Here it is tonight. Right, you can see not much there. It looks like it does sort of try to hold itself together. Right, this is Thursday night, moving on to the Lesser Antilles and the windwards. And then, if you can't keep track of it, that's it. So basically, like non-existent at that point. And then it just moves out to sea. So that's it. And keep in mind with the European model, each click I'm doing is advancing 24 hours. All right, so this is Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, Saturday night. So just so you know, that's how the European model sort of works. Now, the wind shear anomalies, right? We're going to be talking about the shear, but the shear anomalies are actually below average. If you look at the GFS right here, you can see wind shear is between, I'd say, between 10 and 25 or 10 to 20 knots below average. And that's good, all right, but the shear is still a little higher in this region. But the fact that it's, and this is for the next 5 days. Now, this is an average as well. So shear could be like high one day and then really low another day. This is from the 22nd through the 27th. All right, let's take a look at the same time frame, 22nd to the 27th, but with the GFS Canadian model, and you can see pretty much the same thing, even some deeper blues, maybe 10 to 25 knots below average. All right. Now, if we look at the actual shear, though, however, all right, you can see the storm is still having some trouble. There's a storm center. You see shear kind of like coming in from the south and from the west and just shearing it off. All right, and you can see by the time it moves into the Caribbean, right, or about to make landfall, I should say, on the Caribbean islands, right? Look at the shear. The shear just completely takes over after that. So even though the shear is below average, quote unquote, it is still a little high. All right, and for development, we need shear to be lower. Canadian model, again, same thing. Look what happens by the time it gets to the Caribbean. This is like Thursday into Friday. The shear really goes up. I mean, between 20 and even 40 plus knots. That's kind of unbearable. Once you get towards 30, 40 knots, it gets really unbearable. Even 20 is hard to deal with. But, like I just mentioned earlier, with that said, you can still see significant impacts even without development. Like if Claudette never became Claudette, like the only thing, like it's funny because actually Tropical Storm Claudette actually formed when it came on shore. Like it was on shore for like a few minutes before it actually got named. But if Claudette never got named, literally nothing would have changed. All right, like they just decided to give it a name because they decided it needed to. Like if it never got a name and stayed potential tropical cyclone 3, nothing would have changed. Same thing goes with this system, right? All right. So regardless of development, look at the dark greens and the deep moisture that you can see coming through the islands here, right? And there you are, right there. This is Friday into Saturday, or Thursday through Saturday. It could actually last a couple days. Then we see the moisture surge to the Caribbean, so all the islands. I mean, even Cuba, even Haiti, Dominican Republic, Hispaniola, Puerto Rico. So all you guys might even see some increased moisture. Because, I mean, these type of areas can get thunderstorms sometimes every day. It's a tropical environment. So added moisture to that will definitely not be a good thing. All right, regardless if it has a name or not. Canadian model brings the moisture bout even farther south. There it is. Right on top of the islands here. The darkest green colors right on top of the islands. And you can see it just moved through Puerto Rico as I moved through that. Now it's over Haiti and Hispaniola. Eventually it will be near the Cuba and maybe even the Bahamas. All right. And then there's some more dark green colors that's going to feed into the southeast and mid-Atlantic and maybe their next rainstorm up there potentially. That's just far out though. But focus on what it could do to the islands right here. So you can definitely see it on the perceptible water, right? I mean, you can tell where it's tracking just by looking at it. Now, what does this mean for the future, right? Because I talk about storms potentially behind that. Now, I do usually show this in my hurricane discussion videos, which will be coming out obviously soon in the future. So this is now through the 29th. We could see more convection, like the tropical wave we were just talking about, come off of Africa, right? And the green means increased convection. The brownish reddish colors means less convection. You can see the green might start to fade out a little bit end of June through July, but still relevant. And then what happens after this, it becomes a little bit more long term. Sometimes the brown and reds always come in at the end of the loop. Like I've always seen that with the models. The reds will always come in. And then if you were to look at like July 1st through 8th, the reds will be here. But sometimes if you come back to this map on July 1st, it'll be back to green. So sometimes the models are like that. So focus when we look at the CFS model here, focus on the first couple weeks because they're not as long term. But look at the CFS model. June 22nd through the 29th. All right, those greens are definitely across the entire Atlantic basin, and darker greens for that same area off the coast of Africa and even the Eastern Pacific and the Caribbean. So some increased convection. And as long as the conditions are right, those convections can turn into thunderstorms and then tropical storms. So 29th through the 6th, look at over Africa, right? 29th through the 6th or June 29th through July 6th, and even 6th through the 13th. We're still seeing increased convection over Africa, which those storms could in turn go into the Atlantic. So we're going to be watching more storms in the future, not just the one we talked about today, but obviously more that could potentially follow. So thank you guys for watching today's video. I am the Weather Dude, signing off. Till next time, I will catch you guys in the next video.